I parked my old sedan outside the house and got out of the car slowly, feeling my lower back aching after sitting in line at the doctor's office for so long. Dr. Henderson was going on and on about my blood pressure and cholesterol, prescribing new pills that cost as much as an airplane wing. At 73, I'm used to doctors finding more and more things wrong with me, like I'm some old car on a checkup. The keys jingled in the lock, and I pushed open the door. In the hallway stood two large suitcases that definitely hadn't been there the morning I left. I paused, eyeing the unfamiliar woman's purse on the table. Voices came from the living room. "Dad, you made it." "Great, just in time." Kaysen came out of the living room looking like he was the owner of the house, not a guest. He was wearing a crumpled shirt he hadn't changed since yesterday, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired and irritated. "Kaysen, what's going on? Whose stuff is this?" I nodded toward the suitcases. "Sit down, Dad. I have something I need to explain to you." He pointed to a chair in the living room in the way one would talk to children or the mentally retarded. I made my way into the living room and sat down in my usual chair, which was by the window. Kaysen remained standing, with his hands behind his back and swaying on his toes. This was the posture he always had when he was about to announce something unpleasant. "Here goes. Vivian is moving in with us temporarily. You, to be exact. To your house." He spoke quickly, as if he wanted to get it all out and get the conversation over with. "Our place?" Siranaksum, I felt something unpleasant stirring in my stomach. "But you're getting a divorce. I thought she moved out of your apartment months ago." "She did, yeah. But now she's in trouble. Her landlord kicked her out of her apartment, and she hasn't found a new one yet. The divorce is dragging on, and she needs a place to live." Kaysen shrugged, as if he were talking about something as insignificant as tomorrow's weather forecast. "Hush! And you've decided she's going to live here? In my house?" I tried to speak calmly, but my voice trembled with indignation. "Yes, that's right. It's too much space for you anyway. You've been living alone in a 3-bedroom house since Mom died." Kaysen waved his hand, encompassing the entire living room. "And Vivian needs somewhere to live. It's temporary, a few months at most." "Were you going to ask me?" "Oh." I stood up from my chair, feeling the blood rush to my face. "This is my home, Kaysen. I've lived here for 30 years. Dad, don't make a scene. I've already made up my mind. She's scheduled to move in today." Kaysen rubbed his forehead irritably. "You're going to live in the garage. There's a cot, a heater. It's pretty decent for temporary living." I stared at my son, not believing my own ears. The garage. He's seriously suggesting that I, a 73-year-old man, move into the garage so his ex-wife can live in comfort. "You're kidding." "No, I'm dead serious." "Look, Dad, I realize you may not like it, but it's the best way out." Kaysen spoke as if he were explaining something obvious to a stubborn child. "Vivian is used to a certain level of comfort. She needs a proper bedroom, a bathroom, and you don't really care where you sleep." "I do care," I said quietly. "Dad, don't be selfish. This is my ex-wife, the mother of your grandchildren." Kaysen started to get more irritated, his voice rising. "She's in a tough spot and you can help. All it takes is a few months. I didn't have grandchildren." Kaysen and Vivian never had children in 15 years of marriage, though I'd waited and hoped for a long time. But I was silent about it now. What if I said no? Kaysen looked at me in surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to him. "You wouldn't. You're not going to throw your family out on the street." He looked at his watch. "I have to go to the train station to pick her up. The train arrives in an hour. So get your stuff together and move it into the garage. I put a heater in there. It'll be warm." Kaysen headed for the exit, but I called out to him, "How long is this going to take? Until she finds a place of her own, or until we're divorced for good?" He stopped at the door and turned around. "Dad, I'm counting on your understanding. This is a family matter." After he said that, he walked out, slamming the door. I heard his car start, and he drove out of the yard. Silence descended on the house, but his words still echoed in my ears. "I've already made up my mind. You're going to go live in the garage. Don't be selfish." I walked slowly around the living room, touching familiar things. The bookcase Martha and I had picked out at a furniture store 25 years ago. The pictures on the mantel. The chair by the window where I read the newspaper every morning. My home, my place. And Kaysen decided he could just come and dispose of it all like his own property. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. Anger was slowly rising from somewhere in my chest, hot and heavy, but I didn't say anything yet, just nodded and agreed for now. After the door slammed behind Kaysen, I was alone in a house that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. The silence pressed on my ears, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece, a gift from my father-in-law for Martha and me on our silver wedding anniversary. I sat in the chair and stared at the suitcases in the hallway. Two large leather suitcases and a lady's purse. All expensive, high quality. Apparently, Vivian wasn't used to saving money. Rising from my chair, I went to the window and looked out. Mrs. Croft's neighbor was watering the flowers in the front garden, glancing in my direction from time to time. She must have noticed the strange car and the suitcases. By evening, the whole neighborhood would know that Old Man Ashbourne had a new lodger. In Ocean View, news traveled faster than the internet. I stepped away from the window and walked slowly up the stairs to the bedroom. Martha and I's bedroom. It had been unchanged since I'd buried my wife 5 years ago. Her picture on the bedside table, the bottles of perfume on the dressing table that I'd never dared to put away. Even her robe was still hanging on the hook in the bathroom, and now a strange woman would be living here, using Martha's dressing table, sleeping in our bed, and I'll be lying on a cot in the garage, among the paint cans and old tools. I opened the closet and took out a small suitcase. I started putting things away mechanically, not thinking about what I was taking. Shirts, pants, underwear, medicines. Then I took Martha's picture from the nightstand. That's the picture I'll take for sure. As I packed, memories flashed through my mind. Little Kaysen, who'd brought back D's in math from school and begged me not to tell his mom. Teenage Kaysen, who wrecked my car and couldn't admit it for 3 days. The young Kaysen who came begging for money for university tuition. "Dad, it's an investment in my future," he said then, 25 years ago. "I'll pay it back with interest when I get a job." I gave him all my savings. $20,000 was a lot of money in those days. I had to take out a home equity loan to cover the rest of my tuition. For 4 years, I paid off that loan, denying myself many things. Martha sewed old dresses instead of buying new ones. I took the bus to work to save gas. Kaysen graduated magna cum laude with a degree in computer science. Got a job at a good company as a programmer, but he never paid me back. First, he said he needed time to get back on his feet. Then other expenses came up. Rent, car, wedding. Oh, the wedding. I remember it down to the last detail. Vivian wanted a lavish ceremony at a fancy restaurant. $3,000 dress, flowers, musicians, photographer. Kaysen came to me a month before the wedding. "Dad, we're having a little budget problem," he said, sitting in the same living room chair where he'd announced his decision today. "The wedding is going to cost more than we planned." "How much more?" I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was going. "We're $15,000 short. I know it's a lot to ask, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime day. Vivian has dreamed of having a beautiful wedding since he was a little girl." I looked at Martha, who was knitting in the corner of the couch. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "We always made these decisions together." "Okay," I said, "but this is the last time, Kaysen. After you get married, you're a grown man, and you have to figure out your own financial problems." "Sure, Dad, I understand. This is the last time." $15,000. Martha had to sell her mother's engagement ring, the only valuable thing she had left of her family. An antique diamond ring that she cherished like the apple of her eye. She'd sold it to a jeweler for half its value, just to help her son. "It's okay," she told me at the time, "as long as the kids are happy." The wedding was a success. Vivian was beautiful in her white dress, and Kaysen was happy. The guests ate expensive treats and drank champagne, danced to the music of the orchestra. I sat at the table and thought about my mother-in-law's ring, which Martha used to wear on special occasions. Now it was worn by some strange woman who had bought it at a pawn shop, but that turned out not to be the last time either. A year later, Kaysen came to get money for a down payment on an apartment, then for a car, then for furniture. Each time he promised it would be the last time. Each time he found a convincing reason why he couldn't do without my help. And now he doesn't even ask. He just shows up and announces that I have to vacate my bedroom and move into the garage, because his ex-wife needs a place to live. I closed my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was still silent. broken only by the ticking of the clock. In an hour and a half, Kaysen would be back from the train station with Vivian. They would enter my house as full-fledged masters, and I would play the role of a submissive old man who could be moved from place to place at will. But maybe I should rethink the rules of the game. I stood up and walked over to the desk in the corner of the bedroom. The bottom drawer held important documents: wills, insurance policies, deeds to the house. I pulled out a folder and looked through the contents. The certificate of title for the house was in my name. I owned the house unconditionally, no co-owners or encumbrances. I wondered if Kaysen remembered that, or did he already think he had the right to dispose of my property as his own? I put the papers back in the folder and locked the drawer. Then I grabbed my suitcase and went downstairs. Vivian's things were still standing in the hallway, waiting for the landlady. I walked past them and out into the yard. The garage stood in the far corner of the lot behind the house, a massive wooden structure I'd built myself 20 years ago with the help of a neighbor. Inside were tools, gardening equipment, old furniture, and boxes of things I was sorry to throw away. Indeed, there was an army cot in the corner and a small electric heater next to it. So Kaysen had indeed prepared a place for me in advance. I set the suitcase on the workbench and looked around. The floor was concrete and the walls were wood, but not insulated. One small window just below the ceiling. It was cold in the winter, even with a heater. Damp and uncomfortable. A place to store things not for human life. This is where my son suggests I spend the next few months. I stepped out of the garage and looked at the house. My home, where I have lived for 30 years. Where I raised my son, cared for my sick wife, and grieved after her death. The house that I'd kept in order, that I'd paid taxes on, that had been my fortress and refuge. And now Kaysen thought he could just take it away from me. The time until they returned stretched slowly. I walked around the house, looking at familiar things with new eyes. The family photos on the walls. Martha as a young girl, beautiful and smiling. Our wedding, Kaysen's birth, his first steps, first day of school, graduation, the story of an entire family captured in photographs. I wonder what will happen to those pictures when Vivian moves in. Will she ask to remove them so they don't embarrass her with the presence of the past? Or would she just turn the frames to the wall? I walked over to the phone in the living room. A good old landline that Martha and I had bought back in the 90s. On the phone table was a tattered address book with numbers in it. I flipped through the pages, finding familiar names. Gerald Hampshire, my former lab colleague. Seamus O'Malley, with whom we'd been friends since our student days. Dr. Rainford, the family lawyer who had drafted the will after Martha's death. I had connections. There were people who could help if needed. People who remembered me not as a decrepit old man, but as a competent chemical engineer with 40 years of experience. Maybe it was time to remind my son that his father was not a helpless old man to be disregarded. The clock on the mantelpiece read 4:30. The train was due at 4, which meant I had about 40 minutes to spare. That would be enough time to make a few important calls. I picked up the phone and dialed the first number. The first call I made was to Gerald Hampshire. We had worked together in the research laboratory of a chemical concern for 20 years until I retired. Gerald was 10 years younger than me and was still working, but as chief engineer. An intelligent, decent man who never refused to help his colleagues. "Roderick, what a pleasant surprise," I heard a familiar voice in the phone. "How are you? How's your health?" "Hello, Jerry. Not so good, to tell you the truth. Tell me, do you still know Thomas Milford from the City Water Company?" "Tom? Sure. We meet occasionally at conferences. What happened?" I explained the situation in general terms without going into the details of the family conflict. I simply said that I had temporary tenants in my house who might cause problems with utilities, and I needed to prepare for possible trouble. "I see," Gerald said after a short pause. "You know, Tom has an electrician he knows, Patrick Stelling, a very qualified specialist, but let's just say he's got a temper. He can make wiring problems in the house very difficult to diagnose, if you know what I mean." "I do. Can you put me in touch with him?" "I'll give you Tom's number, and he can put you in touch with Patrick. Just be careful, Roderick. I don't know what's going on in there, but don't do anything rash." I wrote down the phone number and thanked my old friend. Gerald had always been a cautious man, but he knew how to support a comrade in times of need. The next call was to Dr. Rainford. the Ashbourne family's attorney for 15 years. It was he who had handled all the paperwork after Martha's death, drafted the will, helped with the inheritance taxes. An older man, but a sharp mind who knew the ins and outs of housing law. "Mr. Ashbourne, it's good to hear from you," Dr. Rainford said in his soft voice. "I trust you are well?" "Not quite, doctor. I have a question about housing law. If a homeowner wants to transfer the property to a third party, how quickly can it be done?" "It depends on the circumstances. A deed of gift can be done in a few days if all the paperwork is in order. Sale, also quickly, if the buyer has already been found and is ready to pay." "Are there any urgent circumstances?" I told the lawyer about the situation, not hiding my indignation at my son's actions. Rainford listened silently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "I understand your outrage, Mr. Ashbourne. You're absolutely right. No one can force you to leave your own home. But tell me, do you really want to remortgage the property? It's a big step." "I'm considering all options, doctor. I just want to know what my options are." "Good. If you decide I can have the paperwork ready as soon as possible, I have connections at the registry office, so it'll take 3 days at the most. But think it over. It's better to make such decisions with a cool head." I thanked the lawyer and hung up. 3 days. In 3 days, you can completely change the situation if you need to. The third call was to Seamus O'Malley, an old friend of mine from my university days, with whom we had maintained a lifelong relationship. Seamus worked for an insurance company until he retired and knew a lot of people in many different fields. He was also Irish to the core and couldn't stand to see anyone offended. "Roderick, my friend," "Honma or Nui," came a loud voice with a slight accent. "I haven't heard your voice in a long time. How are you?" "I've been better, Seamus. Listen, do you happen to know any plumbers? Reliable, but the kind that might, let's just say, cause some trouble at the request of a customer?" Seamus chuckled into the phone. "Oh, does anyone have a problem with uninvited guests? I know this guy, Cody Paxton. Ex-military, works as a plumber. He can make the hot water run out, the sewer line clog, and no one will ever know what's going on. You want his number?" "I do. And one more thing, I was wondering if you could make some inquiries about a woman. Vivian. I'm having trouble remembering her last name. Hell, I can't remember her maiden name. But she's divorcing my son, Cason Ashburn." "Got it. Give me a day or two to find out something. I got people I know in different places. We'll dig something up." After talking to Seamus, I felt energized. For the first time in years, I was taking action, not just submitting to whatever life threw at me. For too long, I'd been the convenient father who was always willing to help and never minded. It was time to show Cason that his old man could still stand up for himself. I went up to the bedroom and pulled an old toolbox out of the closet. A set of screwdrivers, pliers, a multimeter, anything I might need for small technical jobs. I'd gotten pretty good at electrical work in my youth, even wiring this house with my own hands. First, I went down to the basement where the electrical panel was located, an old but reliable system that I had installed myself 15 years ago. I scrutinized the wiring diagram and found what I was looking for, the wire that led to the outlets in the master bedroom where Vivian was going to live. Careful not to short circuit, I loosened a few of the connections slightly. Not enough to create a fire hazard, but enough to make the contact unstable. Now the outlets in the bedroom will be intermittent, on and off for no apparent reason. The next target was the heating system, an old gas boiler in the basement that had been in service for 20 years. I knew the system like the back of my hand, having installed it myself and repaired it many times. The thermostat in the master bedroom could be easily disrupted by slightly damaging the temperature sensor. The room would go from overheated to too cold. Going up to the bathroom that Vivian would be using, I examined the plumbing. The hot water faucet could be adjusted so that the pressure became erratic, from too strong to barely noticeable. And if you tweak the valve under the sink a little, it would start to leak, creating a constant dampness. All of these minor faults individually seemed insignificant, but together they will create an atmosphere of constant discomfort. A person living in such a house will feel like a needle. When I had finished making the technical arrangements, I returned to the living room and sat down in my chair. The clock read 5:15. The train had already arrived, and Cason and Vivian should be here any minute. I pulled my notebook out of my pocket and scrutinized the numbers my friends had given me. Thomas Milford at the water company, Patrick Stelling the electrician, Cody Paxton the plumber. I'll be contacting each of them tomorrow. I did the prep work today, and then the real fun begins. The sound of a car in the driveway made me hide my notebook and assume a relaxed pose. My son and his ex-wife were entering the house. It was time to meet the lady for whom I'd been evicted to the garage. But now I was ready for that meeting. I had a plan. I had connections. I had the means to carry it out. Kaysen and his ex-wife thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. They would soon realize how wrong they were. The door opened and Kaysen entered the hallway, dragging another suitcase behind him. He was followed by a woman, tall, slender, with carefully styled blonde hair. She was dressed in an expensive coat and held herself with the air of someone accustomed to comfort and attention. "Dad, I'd like you to meet her," Kaysen said, setting the suitcase down next to the others. "This is Vivian." I got up from my chair and nodded politely. The game had begun. The woman whom Kaysen introduced as Vivian looked me over from head to toe with an appraising gaze. Her eyes, light blue, almost icy, lingered on my old homemade shirt and worn pants. I could see her mentally cataloging my appearance, like she was evaluating merchandise in a store. "Hello," she said in a cold tone, not even extending her hand to introduce herself. "Kaysen's told me a lot about you. I wonder what exactly he told me." Nothing particularly flattering, judging from her tone. "Likewise," I said, giving her a weak smile. "Welcome to our home." Vivian took off her coat and handed it to Kaysen without even looking at him. The movement was so natural that it was clear she was used to men serving her. Under the coat, she wore an expensive silk blouse and a pencil skirt that emphasized her slender figure. A pearl necklace glistened around her neck and several rings with stones on her fingers. She didn't look like she was in serious financial trouble. "Will you show me the house?" She turned to Kaysen, completely ignoring my presence. "Sure. Dad, do you mind if we look around?" Kaysen asked the question as a matter of pretense, but it was clear he wasn't interested in my opinion. "Of course," I said, sitting back in the chair. "Make yourselves at home." They headed for the stairs and I heard their footsteps clattering on the wooden steps. Vivian's voice came from upstairs. She was saying something to Kaysen, but I couldn't make out the words. The tone was displeased. I could hear it clearly. A few minutes later, they came down to the living room. Vivian's face was a poorly concealed look of disappointment. "Kaysen, you said the house was big," she said reproachfully, "and the bedroom is so small. And the wallpaper's awful. It's in florals. How can you live with wallpaper like that?" Martha had chosen the floral wallpaper 20 years ago. Delicate roses on a cream background. She loved it so much, she said it made the place feel cozy. After she died, I didn't change anything in the bedroom. I left it as it was. "You can change the wallpaper," Kaysen said conciliatorily, "if you don't like it. And the furniture? That dressing table is ancient. And the bed squeaks," I checked. Vivian wrinkled her nose as if discussing something unpleasant. "And it smells old. An old smell." I gripped the armrests of the chair, feeling the anger rise. An old smell. She was talking about the smell of my late wife, the room where we'd lived 30 years of happy togetherness. "Vivian, don't exaggerate," Kaysen said uncertainly. "It's temporary, remember?" "Temporary can last months," she cut him off. "I'm not going to live in a museum. Something has to change." They walked into the kitchen and I heard the cabinets opening, the refrigerator. Vivian commented on every detail, and all the comments were negative. The dishes are old, the stove is sub-zero, the refrigerator is small, the faucets on the sink need replacing. "Where's the washing machine?" she asked. "In the basement," Kaysen answered. "In the basement? Really? How am I supposed to get down there with the laundry? I have heels." "You can do laundry in slippers." "Jason, do you even realize what you're saying? I can't change my clothes every time I do laundry." As I listened to this conversation, I became more and more convinced that I had made the right decision. This woman thought that the whole world should adjust to her convenience. It wasn't enough for her to get free housing. She demanded that it be remodeled to her tastes. They returned to the living room. Vivian sat down on the sofa, adjusted her skirt, and looked at me with what might be called a condescending expression. "Mr. Ashburn," she began in the way one speaks to children who don't understand, Kaysen told me that you would live in the garage while I'm here. That's very generous of you. Generous, like it was my decision, not my compulsion. You're welcome, I mumbled, lowering my eyes. Glad to help the family. Good, but there's something I need to talk to you about. She leaned back on the couch and crossed her legs. You see, I have a specific routine. I'm used to getting up late, around 10 in the morning, and I don't like early noise in the house. I hope you understand. I nodded, pretending to understand. So in my own house, I shouldn't make any noise in the morning. That's great. I also can't stand the smell of cooking, especially fish or garlic. If you cook anything like that, do it with the kitchen doors closed and the hood on. Vivian listed the requirements with the air of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. I see, I said. One more thing. I'm allergic to dust, so I'll need to clean more often, especially vacuuming. But not in the morning, of course. Sure, I agreed. Can you turn down the TV? The sound is very loud. I looked at the TV, which was off, and nodded again. Apparently, she meant that she didn't want to hear the sound of the TV from her room at all. Kaysen sat next to her and was silent. Occasionally, he would squint disapprovingly at me, like I was doing something wrong. But he never once contradicted his ex-wife, never once said that her demands were excessive. Speaking of the bathroom, Vivian continued, I'm going to need more room for my cosmetics. There are some old bottles in there now. I think we can get rid of them. Old bottles. Martha's perfume, which I never got around to throwing away. The last thing left of her in the bathroom. It's my late wife's perfume, I said quietly. Yes, I understand, Vivian nodded without a trace of sympathy. But you don't need them anymore, do you? And I need a place for my grooming products. She said it as simply as if she were talking about discarded newspapers or empty jars. If you don't need it, it's gone. Yeah. I'll think about it, I mumbled. Sup on? I don't know what there is to think about, Kaysen interjected. Dad, Mom died 5 years ago. It's about time. He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Time to forget, time to throw away, time to move on. As if loving someone had an expiration date, like milk in a refrigerator. Okay, I said. I'll put the vials away. That's great, Vivian smiled contentedly. I can see we're going to get along just fine. She got up from the couch and went to the window, looking out at the yard. What's that building over there in the corner? She asked, pointing to the garage. The garage, Kaysen answered. That's where Daddy's going to live now. I see. What do you keep in it? Tools, gardening equipment, old furniture, I listed. Does it take up a lot of space? Well, yes, quite a lot. Vivian shook her head thoughtfully. Too bad. You could make some space. Make it a kind of workshop. Or a yoga studio. I have a mat and special equipment. So now she's claiming the garage, too. It's not enough she's got to get her hands on my sanctuary, too. Vivian, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, Kaysen said. You know this is only temporary. Of course I do. I'm just thinking of ways to make our stay here more comfortable. Our stay? I wonder when Kaysen was planning on moving into my house. Or was he planning on living here permanently, visiting his ex-wife? By the way, Kaysen, Vivian said, returning to the couch. What about the internet? I need good speed for my work. What's your speed right now? She turned to me. I'm not sure, I answered. The usual for home use. That might not be enough. I need high-speed internet. I'll have to change my rate. Okay, Kaysen agreed. I'll call the company tomorrow. One more thing. I need a place to work. A desk, a comfortable chair, good lighting. There's no room for that in the bedroom. We could put a desk in the living room, Kaysen suggested. The living room? Vivian looked at him in surprise. What about Kaysen's father? He's here watching TV, reading the paper. I need quiet for work. Kaysen turned to me. Dad, can't you, spend time in a place other than the living room? Like the kitchen or your room in the garage? My room in the garage. He was getting used to the idea of me living there permanently. Sure, I said dutifully. I don't want to interfere with work. You see, said Vivian, your father is a very understanding man. Understanding. Yes, I understood a lot of things. I understood that this woman considered herself the mistress of the house. I understood that her son was ready to support her every demand. I realized that if I didn't do something about it, I'd soon be without a home of my own. I'll go check the garage, I said, rising from my chair. See if everything's okay. That's a good idea, Kaysen nodded. We'll go through Vivian's stuff. I headed for the door, but Vivian's voice stopped me. Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Ashburn, could I ask you not to walk around the house in your home clothes? I mean when I'm at home. It's just that I'm used to certain standards. I turned around and looked at her. She was sitting on my couch in my living room, dictating to me the rules of behavior in my own home. Of course, I said quietly. I'll keep that in mind. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. The house was getting stuffy, not from lack of oxygen, but from the presence of this woman. She radiated such confidence, such arrogance, that it was physically difficult to be around her. I walked to the garage and thought about how quickly my life had changed. In the morning, I was the master of my own home. Now, I was an unwanted guest who was preventing the new residents from settling in. But the game was just beginning. Vivian thought she was dealing with a decrepit old man who would bear all the humiliation. She would soon realize how wrong she was. By 9 p.m., I finally moved into the garage. I took a pillow, a blanket, a few changes of underwear, and toiletries from the house. Kaysen and Vivian locked themselves in the master bedroom, sorting through her many suitcases. I could hear them moving furniture around, discussing things, laughing. It was like it was their house, not mine. The garage greeted me with the smell of machine oil, old wood, and mold. The concrete floor was cold even through the soles of my boots. An electric heater hummed in the corner, but there was little heat from it. A cot stood between the workbench and a rack of paint cans. I lay down on the metal bunk and pulled the blanket up to my chin. The cot creaked with every movement. The mattress, a thin foam mattress, offered little protection from the hard metal springs. The cold crept under the blanket, despite the heater running. Around 11:30, the sounds in the house died down, but then I heard voices, first an indistinct hum, then individual words. Vivian's voice penetrated the walls better than Kaysen's low voice. They were talking in the bedroom, and the sound was coming through the ajar window. Curiosity overpowered fatigue. I quietly rose from the cot and crept to the garage wall. The sounds could be heard more clearly there. I can't believe you're making me live in this museum, Vivian said resentfully. Heck, everything is old, neglected. It's only temporary, dear, Kaysen replied. Until the divorce is finalized. How long will that last? I didn't sign a contract to live in a nursing home. Don't exaggerate, and Dad has agreed to move into the garage temporarily. He did? Vivian laughed wryly. He had no choice. You put him on the spot. Look, can we get rid of those awful pictures? She continued. There are portraits of your dead mother everywhere. It's creepy to sleep in a room with dead people staring at you. They're family photos, Kaysen objected uncertainly. So what? I'm not a member of that family. Why would I want to look at your mother every day? A pause, then Kaysen's voice. Okay, I'll clean it up tomorrow. One more thing. This dressing table is awful. Can we replace it with something modern? Vivian, it's my parents' furniture. Kaysen, we had a deal. Either you make this place bearable, or I'll look for something else. Okay, he's given up. I'll see what I can do. And we need to do something about the wallpaper. Roses are a nightmare. It's expensive. A couple $1,000, think about it. If we fix it up, the house will go up in value. When he's old enough, you can sell the house for more. When Dad's old enough, they're already planning my death and the inheritance. Don't say that, Kaysen muttered. Your father is 73 years old. You're going to inherit the house anyway. Why not fix it up beforehand, if you look at it that way? Exactly. What about the will? Does he leave the house to you? Yes, of course, I'm the sole beneficiary. Then it's okay. What if he doesn't want it renovated? Schichtan, what can he do? Vivian laughed. Your father is an old, lonely man. If we say we're doing it for his benefit, he'll be grateful. You're probably right. And then, if he's really against it, we can always find another solution. Nursing homes are pretty good these days. Nursing homes. They were discussing putting me in a nursing home. The voices got quieter. I went back to the cot and lay down, pulling the blanket over my head. Anger was slowly rising from somewhere in my chest. These two were making plans for my life, my home, my future. But I had an advantage. I knew about their plans, and they thought they were dealing with a submissive old man. Tomorrow their nightmare would begin. I woke up this morning with a sore back and neck. The cot was even less comfortable than it had seemed the night before. The metal springs were digging into my body through the thin mattress, and the cold made my muscles stiff. The heater had been running all night, but the garage was still dank. The clock on the wall showed 7:30. There was still no sound in the house. Vivian had slept, as promised, until 10 in the morning. Perfect time to start the operation. I dressed, washed my face with cold water from the garden hose, and crept quietly into the house through the back door. The kitchen was warm and cozy. The contrast with the garage was painful. This was my kitchen, where I'd had breakfast every morning for the last 5 years. But now I felt like a thief in here. I put the kettle on and took the eggs out of the fridge. Yesterday, Vivian had demanded quiet mornings, but I had the right to have breakfast in my own home. I had to eat breakfast quickly and carefully, being careful not to rattle the dishes. While the food was cooking, I pulled out a notebook with phone numbers. The first order of business was to contact Thomas Milford, who could put me in touch with Patrick Stelling, the electrician. But it was too early for calls. Not everyone likes to be woken up at 7 in the morning. At 8:30, I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Kaysen was awake. He came down to the kitchen a few minutes later, disheveled and sleep-deprived. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and homemade pants. "Good morning, Dad," he mumbled, heading for the coffee maker. "How did you sleep in the garage?" "Fine," I answered, finishing my eggs. "It's a little chilly, but that's okay." "Good. And Vivian's still asleep, so try not to make any noise." He said it so naturally, as if demanding silence in my house was reasonable. I nodded and remained silent. Kaysen made coffee and sat across from me at the table. He looked thoughtful, even a little worried. "Dad, there's something we need to talk about," he began, stirring the coffee with his spoon. "You see, Vivian thinks the house needs some repairs." "What kind of repairs?" I asked, acting surprised. "Well, wallpaper in the bedroom, maybe paint in the bathroom. Nothing major, just freshening up the decor." Kaysen avoided looking me in the eye. "You see, women are more sensitive about these things." "The house is in good condition," I said quietly. "I take care of it myself." "Sure, Dad. You're doing a good job. It's just sometimes it's good to update things. Give it a more, modern look." Modern, so anything that reminded me of Martha and our life together was considered outdated. "It's expensive," I countered. "The wallpaper, the paint, the craftsmanship. Don't worry about it. Vivian and I will cover the cost. Think of it as a gift. A gift. I'm paying for the renovations to my house because, in the end, whoever owns the house will pay." "I don't know, Kaysen. I like it the way it is." "Dad, at least give it a try. If you don't like it, you can always take it back." Kaysen finally looked at me. "It's not forever. It's just that Vivian's staying here for now." "Okay," I gave in after a pause. If that's what you think." "Great." Kaysen was excited. "I'll go to the building store this afternoon and look at the options." He finished his coffee and got up from the table. "Now I have to go to work. If there's an emergency, call me on my cell phone." After he left, the house was quiet again. Vivian continued to sleep. I washed the dishes and went out into the yard to call Thomas Milford. It was better to call outside the house, for there was no chance of anyone overhearing the conversation. "Tom, it's Roderick Ashbourne. Gerald Hampshire gave me your number." "Roderick, I haven't heard your voice in a while. How's it going?" I explained the situation in general terms, without going into family details. I simply said that there were temporary tenants in the house, and I needed the help of an electrician who knew how to create controlled wiring problems. "Oh, I see," Tom said after a short pause. "Patrick Stelling is your man. He's a great technician, but he can make things go so wrong that no one will know what's wrong. I'll give you his number." Patrick turned out to be a man of few words with a husky voice. After listening to my request, he asked a few technical questions about the wiring in the house and agreed to come over in the evening when it got dark. Payment would be cash, no paperwork or checks. "Just remember," he warned, "I do quality work. Breakdowns will look natural, but they will be very difficult to find and fix." "That's exactly what's needed," I replied. Next was a call to Cody Paxton, the plumber that Seamus O'Malley had recommended. Cody also agreed to help, but warned me that his services were not cheap. Good work pays well, he said. I can fix problems with hot water, pressure, sewage. It'll look like natural wear and tear on the equipment. We've made arrangements for tomorrow. Cody will arrive early in the morning when Kaysen is at work and Vivian is still asleep. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, sounds were heard in the house. Vivian was awake. I went back into the house and sat in the kitchen with the newspaper, posing as a peaceful retiree reading the news over breakfast. Vivian came downstairs half an hour later. She was in a silk robe, her hair neatly styled, her makeup flawless. Even in the morning, just waking up, she looked like she was going to a social gathering. "Good morning, Mr. Ashbourne," she said in a cool tone. "I hope you didn't make too much noise." "I was trying to be quiet," I replied obediently. "Good. Where's Kaysen?" "At work. He left around 8. Vivian nodded and went to the coffee maker. She poured herself some coffee into a dainty cup. She must have brought her own and sat down at the table across from me. "Kaysen told me you've agreed to some repairs," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "That's very wise of you. If you think it's necessary, I absolutely do. The house needs updating." She looked around the kitchen with an appraising eye. "By the way, what about the plumbing? I noticed last night that the pressure in the shower was a little low." "I don't know," I shrugged. "It seems normal to me. Maybe men are less demanding about these things. But I need good pressure to wash my hair. Could you do something about that?" "I don't know much about plumbing," I lied. "Maybe we should call a handyman." "That's a good idea. Call someone today." I nodded, mentally chuckling. Cody Paxton would do the plumbing tomorrow, but it wouldn't be what Vivian expected. The day passed quietly. Vivian spent most of her time in the bedroom, talking on the phone, working on her laptop. I did chores, read, cooked dinner. I tried to stay out of the way and not interfere with my new landlady settling in. Kaysen came back around 6 in the evening with wallpaper samples and a furniture catalog. He and Vivian had a long discussion in the living room, and I sat in the kitchen pretending to read the newspaper. In fact, I was listening to the conversation. "I like this one," Vivian said, rustling the pages of the catalog. "Light colors, modern design, and no flowers." "Not bad," Kaysen agreed. "How much is it going to cost?" "Not that much. About $1,500 for materials plus labor. $1,500 for wallpaper for one room." Martha had spent her whole life saving money on the little things so that we could afford the things that really mattered. This woman spends money on whims without thinking about the cost. "And the furniture?" Kaysen asked. "The dressing table can be ordered from the same store. This one white, with a mirror in a modern frame. Very stylish." "Is it expensive?" $800. Not including shipping. 800 more. That's over $2,000 in one day. And that's just the beginning. There'd be paint, craftsmen, maybe new furniture in other rooms. At 9:30, when it was dark, I went out into the yard and waited for Patrick Stelling. He arrived in an old unmarked pickup truck and got to work at once. A short, stout man in his 50s, he moved with confidence and professionalism. "Yeah, show me the electrical panel," he asked. Patrick scrutinized the wiring in the basement, checked something with a multimeter, shook his head. "It's an old system, but it's reliable. Now I'll make it so that problems will occur regularly, but it will be almost impossible to find them." He worked for about an hour, using the tools he had brought with him. Occasionally he mumbled something to himself, making notes in a notebook. Finally he straightened up and nodded. "It's done. Tomorrow night we'll start having electrical problems in the master bedroom and bathroom. It'll be on or off. It'll be completely unpredictable." "And there's no danger?" I asked. "No danger. I don't create emergencies, only inconveniences." Patrick gathered his tools in his bag. "But keep in mind that if they call an electrician, he won't find anything. They'll have to change all the wiring in this part of the house, and that'll cost $15,000 or $20,000. $15,000 to $20,000. A good amount of money that would make Vivian reconsider her plans to live comfortably in my house. I paid Patrick in cash $500 for the job. Expensive, but the result was worth it. When the electrician left, I returned to the house. Kaysen and Vivian were still sitting in the living room, discussing the details of the renovation. I went into the kitchen, made myself some tea, and sat down at the table, looking like a tired old man who didn't understand what was going on around him. "Mr. Ashburn," Vivian called out to me, "we've decided to start the renovations tomorrow. I hope you don't mind." "If you say so," I said obediently. "You know best what needs to be done." "That's fine. Kaysen has booked the masters for the day after tomorrow. A plumber will come tomorrow morning to look at the plumbing problems." If she'd known what kind of plumber was coming and what kind of problems he'd cause, she wouldn't have been so pleased. But for now, Vivian made plans to improve the house, and I played the role of the helpless old man who agrees with all of the youth's decisions. The game was just beginning, and so far I was winning. The trouble started the next morning, just as Patrick Stelling had promised. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee when I heard indignant shouts from the upstairs bathroom. Vivian's voice sounded hysterical. She was clearly furious. "Kaysen! Kaysen, get in here right now!" I heard Kaysen coming up the stairs, his hurried footsteps down the hall. Then the voices became muffled, but the irritation in Vivian's tone was clear. A few minutes later, they came down to the kitchen. Vivian was in her robe, her hair wet, her face red with anger. Kaysen looked confused and worried. "Mr. Ashbourne," Vivian addressed me in a stern tone, "there's a problem with your plumbing. The hot water is on and off. I tried to take a shower, and the water kept changing from boiling to ice cold." I looked up from the paper and looked at her with an expression of genuine surprise. "It's strange," I said slowly. "Tudi, everything was working fine yesterday. Maybe the problem is temporary." "Temporary?" Vivian raised her voice. "Kaysen, explain to your father that normal people can't live with plumbing like this." Kaysen coughed awkwardly. "Dad, maybe we should really call a handyman. Check the system?" "Sure," I agreed. "I'll call today." "And," Vivian continued, "there's a problem with the electricity in the bedroom. The outlets aren't working properly. I turned on the hairdryer, and it shut off in the middle of drying my hair." I shook my head with the look of a concerned landlord. "The house is old. The contacts could be loose. The electrician needs to be checked too." "Kaysen said the house was in good condition," Vivian said reproachfully, looking at her son. "It's in good condition," Kaysen defended himself. "It's just that sometimes there are minor glitches. That's normal for a house this age." "Minor malfunctions?" Vivian clearly disagreed with that assessment. "I can't bathe properly. I can't dry my hair. I can't use electrical appliances. It's not a minor problem. It's a disaster." At this point, the phone rang. I got up to answer it, but it was Cody Paxton, the plumber who was supposed to come this morning. "Mr. Ashbourne, I'm at your house. May I come in?" "Sure," I answered. "Come on in. The door's open." Cody was a tall man of about 45 with a tanned face and calloused hands. He was wearing work clothes and holding a toolbox. He looked like a real handyman. "Did you call for a plumber?" he asked as he entered the kitchen. "Yeah, we're having trouble with the hot water," Kaysen said before I could answer. "I see. Let's see." Cody nodded. "Where's the hot water heater?" I led him down to the basement and showed him the boiler and pipes. Cody took a professional look at the system, checking things out, turning valves. He really did look like an experienced plumber, but I knew his job was not to fix, but to break. "You see," he said, rising from the basement, "you have an old system. You need to replace a few components. I can make a temporary repair, but it won't last long." "And how much would a major overhaul cost?" Kaysen asked. 5 or 6,000. Maybe more if there are hidden problems." Vivian turned pale. 6,000? For plumbing? Older houses require more investment. Cody shrugged. "In the meantime, I'll do what I can. Maybe it'll last a week or two." He went down to the basement again and worked there for about an hour. I knew he wasn't fixing the system, but rather creating new problems. But he does it so skillfully that no one would suspect sabotage. "It's done," he announced as he went upstairs. "It should work for now, but it won't last long." Kaysen paid him off $200 for the call and diagnostics. Cody left, and we were left alone with the results of his work. For the first few hours, the system actually worked. Vivian was able to shower and dry her hair, but by lunchtime, the problems resumed with renewed vigor. Not only did the hot water now disappear without warning, but the pressure became completely unpredictable. "This is impossible!" screamed Vivian, running out of the bathroom with a wet head. "I'm standing under the shower, and the water's pouring out of the bucket, and then it's just a trickle. Kaysen tried to figure it out himself, but he didn't understand anything about plumbing. He turned a few faucets, tapped on the pipes, but got no results. "Dad, can't you take a look?" He came to me. "Maybe you know what's wrong?" I got up from the chair, pretending to be an old man who was ready to help, but does not understand much about technology. "I can try, of course, but I'm not a plumber." I went down to the basement, turned a few valves at random, tapped on the pipes. I pretended to look for something, but I couldn't find it. "I don't understand," I said, going upstairs. "Quid, the foreman said he fixed it. Maybe the problem was more serious than it seemed." "One thing is clear," Vivian said. "It's impossible to live like this. Kaysen, we have to do something." "What do you suggest?" Kaysen asked. "Call in other craftsmen, someone more skilled." "Or," she pondered, "maybe we should find another place to live." "What other place? A rented apartment? We don't have any money for rent." "Then we need to fix this place up, immediately." By late afternoon, the situation had gotten worse. The electricity in the bedroom started to go out every half hour. The outlets worked unpredictably, either energized or not. Vivian couldn't use her hairdryer, her electric shaver, her phone charger. "Mr. Ashbourne," she said at dinner, looking at me with frank displeasure, "how long has your house been in this condition?" "In what condition?" I asked in an innocent tone. "In a state of disintegration. Nothing works, everything breaks down. How do you even live here?" "Well, I'm alone," I shrugged. "I don't need a lot of amenities. I can wash with cold water, rid by candlelight." "By candlelight?" Vivian stared at me in horror. "Are you serious?" "That's the way it was in my time," I replied nonchalantly. "Young people are used to comfort, but we old people don't care." "Kaysen," she turned to her son, "do you hear what your father is saying? He's living in the Middle Ages." "Dad, what are you saying?" said Kaysen, embarrassed. "The house is modern with all the amenities." "What conveniences?" Vivian was indignant. "If everything breaks down all the time?" "It's just a coincidence," Kaysen tried to reassure her. "Tomorrow we'll call an electrician and everything will be fine." But Kaysen didn't have time to call an electrician. In the morning, the problems became even more serious. Now the power was out not only in the bedroom, but also in the bathroom. Vivian couldn't turn on the light to put on her makeup, and the fan she used to turn on after a shower didn't work. "This is some kind of nightmare," she shouted, going down to the kitchen. "I can't even get ready properly in the morning." "Honey, just bear with me," Kaysen pleaded. "I'll find a good electrician today." "What if he can't help? What if it's the wiring itself? How much would that cost?" Kaysen didn't know what to say. I sat at the table drinking tea and playing the old man who doesn't understand what all the fuss is about. "Maybe you should look somewhere else," I suggested in a naive tone of voice. "Since it's so uncomfortable here." Vivian turned to me sharply. "Another place? We don't have money for rent. You know our situation." "Well, then we'll have to put up with it," I said. "What can you do, an old house?" "It's not an old house," Vivian exploded. "It's neglect. You just don't take care of the house." "Vivian, calm down," Kaysen tried to calm her down. "I will not calm down. Your father has made this house so bad that it's uninhabitable, and now he's acting like he doesn't understand." She pointed her finger accusingly at me. "You know it's broken, and you don't do anything to fix it." "I'm trying," I replied obediently. "I called the masters, as you asked." "What handyman?" Vivian snorted. "That plumber just ruined everything. He made it worse." "He probably wasn't very qualified," I agreed. "Next time we should look for a better one." "Next time? How many next times?" Vivian was on the verge of hysterics. "Kaysen, I can't stay here anymore." "Where are we going to go?" Kaysen asked, confused. "I don't know. To a hotel, to a friend's house, anywhere. Not to this crumbling barn. But we have plans to renovate." "What renovations?" Vivian laughed hysterically. "First, we have to fix everything that's broken, and that could cost tens of thousands." I silently listened to their argument, sipping my tea. The plan was working perfectly. Vivian was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Kaysen at a loss. A little more, and they would suggest leaving on their own. But for now, they held on. They really had nowhere to go. Rent was expensive, and there were no relatives in town. All right, Vivian finally said, pulling herself together. We'll deal with problems as they come up. But if things don't improve in the next few days, I'm not staying here for anything. She rose from the table and headed for the stairs. And Mr. Ashbourne, she said, turning to me, next time you call for a handyman, consult with us. Maybe we can find more reliable specialists. Sure, I nodded obediently. Whatever you say. When Vivian went upstairs, Kaysen stayed in the kitchen. He looked tired and irritated. Dad, what's going on with the house? He asked. It's never been this bad before. I don't know, son, I replied with the look of a worried old man. Maybe the appliances have gotten old. Or maybe I just didn't notice the problems when I lived alone. But why all at once? Plumbing and electricity? It happens, I shrugged. One problem leads to another. A house is a living organism, and everything is connected. Kaysen shook his head and got up from the table. We have to find good craftsmen. Otherwise, Vivian will really leave. Is that a bad thing? I asked innocently. Of course it's bad. Kaysen looked at me with surprise. I explained the situation to you. She has nowhere to go. I see, I nodded. Then we'll look for a master. But I knew that no handyman would help. Patrick and Cody had done their job too well. The problems would only get worse, and Vivian's patience would wear thin. The game went on, and I was close to winning. The next day, Kaysen took time off work to do some handyman research. He spent the day calling ads in the newspaper and online. I could hear him on the phone in the living room, explaining the problem, giving the address, arranging a time to visit. The first electrician was scheduled to arrive at 11 in the morning. Kaysen waited for him until 12:30, then called again. The master apologized and said that he had an urgent call, asked to postpone the visit to tomorrow. The second electrician did not arrive at all. He did not answer the phone. The third one came, went up to the bedroom, looked at the sockets, shook his head and said, "You know what? I have a lot of orders now. I can't take your job in the next few weeks." "But it's urgent," Kaysen insisted. "We can pay extra for the urgency." "No, I'm sorry. I'm very busy." The foreman hurried away without even giving me a ballpark figure. I sat in the kitchen and watched with a stone face. But inside I was triumphant. Patrick Stelling had kept his word. Not only had he caused the wiring problems, but he had made sure that other electricians didn't take the job. He had connections in the professional community, and one word was enough to get Roderick Ashbourne's house on the unspoken blacklist. The situation was even worse with the plumbers. The first one didn't even make it to the house. He turned around in the driveway and left. The second came in, asked the name of the owner, and hearing the answer, politely refused to work. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," he said. "I already have arrangements for these days." "And for the following days?" Kaysen asked. "The next days, too." By evening, Kaysen was desperate. He had called more than 20 craftsmen, but no one would take the job. The reasons were different. Busyness, urgent orders, illness, family circumstances. But the result was the same. The house remained unrepaired. "It's some kind of mystery," Kaysen said to Vivian over dinner. "It's like they're all conspiring." "Maybe the house is the problem," Vivian suggested. "Do the handymen see the scale of the work and get scared?" "I don't think so. I mean, they don't even look at the system." One of them left as soon as he entered the house. Vivian thoughtfully twirled her spaghetti with her fork. In the 3 days she'd been living in the house, she'd lost a lot of weight and gauntness. The constant stress of domestic inconvenience was taking its toll on her appearance. Her makeup was no longer flawless, her hair no longer neat. "What does your father say?" she asked. "Nothing much." Surprised, sympathetic. "I think he's hiding something," Vivian said, giving me a suspicious look. He's too calm about everything." I raised my eyes from my plate and looked at her with an expression of genuine bewilderment. What could I be hiding? I'm not a master. I don't understand anything about technique. But why don't craftsmen want to work in your house? "I don't know," I shrugged. "Maybe they have a lot of orders. Or my prices don't suit them." "What prices? You have not yet discussed the cost." "Well, maybe they looked at the house and realized they wouldn't get much money," I suggested. "An old man in an old house is not a good client." Kaysen frowned. "Dad, what does your age have to do with it? We're willing to pay good money." "I don't know," I said. "Maybe they didn't like the house. Or the smell was wrong. Old people have a peculiar odor in their houses. What smell? Vivian exploded. Are you kidding me? Vivian, calm down, Kaysen asked. It's not Dad's fault that the handymen don't show up. Whose fault is it? She turned to Kaysen. Who brought the house to such a state that everything breaks down at the same time? Technology has a way of aging, I interjected. Nothing lasts forever. But why now? Vivian persisted. Everything was working before. Oh, maybe the workload has increased, I said thoughtfully. I used to live alone, and now there are 3 of you. It uses more water, more electricity. 3? Vivian asked. Yeah, you and Kaysen and me. But Kaysen doesn't live here. He only comes here sometimes. I looked at my son in surprise. I thought you'd moved too, since you decided to put Vivian here. No, Dad, I live in my apartment. I'm just visiting Vivian. Gee whiz. Oh, I see, I nodded. That makes 2 of you, but it's still a bigger workload than before. Vivian snorted. Load! Am I turning on factory equipment? Well, hair dryer, hair tongs, phone chargers, laptop, I listed. Modern appliances consume a lot of electricity. They're household appliances. Any normal house should be able to withstand such a load. It should, I agreed, but my house is not old. Maybe the wiring isn't designed for modern appliances. Kaysen listened intently to the conversation. I could see that he was beginning to suspect something wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was yet. Dad, can I see the deed to the house? He asked. When the last electrical repairs were made, what equipment was installed? Sure, I agreed, but I don't remember where the documents are. I'll have to look for them. Look, please. Maybe the foreman will find this information useful. Okay, I'll look tomorrow. The next day, the situation became critical. The electricity in the bedroom and bathroom began to go out every 15 minutes. The hot water was boiling hot and then freezing cold without any warning. Vivian couldn't wash herself, clean herself up, or charge her phone. That's it, she said at breakfast. I can't take it anymore. Another day in these conditions and I'll go crazy. Honey, just bear with me a little longer, Kaysen pleaded. There's another electrician coming today, a very experienced one, recommended to me. Like the one who didn't show up yesterday? Or like the one who left after 5 minutes? This one's different. Proven. The electrician did come. He was an older man with a gray beard and intelligent eyes. He scrutinized the wiring, checked the outlets, shook his head. The system is complicated, he said. Someone must have tampered with the wiring. Unprofessional work. Can you fix it? Kaysen asked hopefully. Theoretically, yes, but it's time-consuming and expensive. You'd have to completely rewire that part of the house. How much would that cost? $20,000. At least. Vivian turned pale. $20,000. For electricity in 2 rooms? It's a complicated job, the foreman shrugged. Besides, you have to take the walls apart, then rebuild them. The finishing work is separate. And how long will it take? 2 weeks, maybe more. 2 weeks without electricity in the bedroom. Vivian was horrified. Yes, and with a lot of dirt, noise. It would be almost impossible to live in the house during that time. Kaysen looked at Vivian confused. What to do? Yeah, I don't know, she answered. But I'm not ready to endure another 2 weeks in these conditions and spend $20,000. Are there any other options? Kaysen asked the electrician. We could do temporary wiring. We could run extension cords. It won't be pretty, but it'll work. Extension cords? Vivian looked offended. In the bedroom? Temporary, the foreman emphasized, until you decide to do a major renovation. There was a heavy silence in the house after the electrician left. Vivian sat on the couch and looked out the window. Kaysen paced around the living room, thinking aloud. $20,000 for electricity, another 5 or 6 for plumbing, plus finishing work after the renovation. Could be $30,000. We don't have that kind of money, Vivian said quietly. What if we took out a loan? For what? The house isn't mine. We sold the apartment. There's no collateral. Kaysen stopped and looked at me. Dad, can you help with the finances? It's your house after all. I acted surprised. Help? I only have a pension. Where would I get that kind of money? But surely you have some savings. A little. For a rainy day. But not $30,000. How much? I thought for a moment, pretending to estimate. 5,000 maybe. Maybe 6. That's only enough for the plumbing, Kaysen said disappointedly. Then we'll do the plumbing first, I suggested. We'll live with the electricity on extension cords. Vivian turned to me sharply. Do you really think I'm going to live with extension cords in my bedroom? What else is there? I said, since there's no money. You know what? Said Vivian, getting up from the couch. I'm beginning to suspect that you've put the house in this condition on purpose, so we can't live here. Why would I do that? I wondered. To throw us out. You don't like me living here. Vivian, don't be silly, Kaysen interjected. Why would my father want to ruin his own house? I don't know why, but there are too many coincidences. Everything breaks just as I arrived. The handymen don't want to work. Your father suddenly doesn't have the money for repairs. She came over to me and leaned in. Confess, Mr. Ashbourne. What did you do to the house? I looked her in the eye with an expression of insulted innocence. I didn't do anything. It's just that the house is old. The appliances are worn out. I don't believe it, Vivian said. There's something fishy going on here. Kaysen looked at me incredulously. Dad, are you sure you don't know anything? Maybe there were some preconditions for the breakdowns? What would I know? I acted offended. I'm not an engineer. The water was running, the lights were on, and that's fine. Now it doesn't flow and it doesn't light up. Maybe it's cosmic rays, I don't know. Cosmic rays, Vivian snorted. Kaysen, your father is just messing with us. Dad, Kaysen said sternly, if you're hiding something, be honest. We're a family. Family, that's ironic. He only thought of family when he needed my help. I'm not hiding anything, I said firmly. But if you don't believe me, maybe you really should look for another place to live. Those were the words Vivian had been waiting for. You know what, Mr. Ashbourne, she said, straightening up. Maybe you're right. Perhaps we really ought to get out of here. The next morning I was awakened by a knock on the garage door. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the clock read 7:30. Someone was banging insistently on the metal door, clearly having no intention of leaving. Mr. Ashbourne, came an unfamiliar male voice. The Postal Service. I have a registered letter for you. I dressed quickly and walked out of the garage. At the gate stood a young letter carrier in a uniform jacket, holding a thick envelope. Roderick Ashbourne? He clarified. Yes, that's me. M. Sign here, please. Registered letter. Return receipt requested. I signed the receipt and took the envelope. Ocean View Veterans Charitable Foundation. Official paper with a stamped seal. Something I'd been waiting for days. The mailman left, and I was left standing in the yard, holding the envelope in my hands. Inside were documents that were going to turn the whole situation upside down, but it was too early to show them yet. We must wait for another letter first. As if by order, at 8:30, another postal car pulled up. Out of it stepped an elderly letter carrier with a gray mustache whom I had known for years, Patrick O'Connor. Good morning, Roderick, he said. How are you? I hear you have new tenants. Temporary, I said. What have you got for me? Official documents, 2 envelopes, both registered. Patrick pulled envelopes out of his bag. One from the municipality and one from some law firm. I signed for both letters. They were the documents that finalized the legal procedure I'd started before Vivian arrived. Serious papers, it seems, Patrick remarked. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I smiled. I was just making some changes in my life. When the mailman left, I went inside. Kaysen was already in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. He looked tired and depressed. The last few days had obviously been hard on him. Morning, Dad. What are those letters? I don't know, I lied, putting the envelopes on the table. Let's see. I opened the first envelope, the one from the municipality. Inside was an official document about the change of ownership of the property. The house at 23 Maple Street was now owned by the Ocean View Veterans Charitable Foundation. What is this? Kaysen asked, seeing my face. I held out the document to him without saying a word. Kaysen read it, and his face turned pale. Dad, what does this mean? His voice trembled. Did you sell the house? I didn't sell it. I gave it to him. A gift? Kaysen stared at me in horror. Who? Why? Shukinan, to a veterans charity. I spoke calmly like I was discussing the weather. I thought it was the right thing to do. The right thing? Kaysen jumped out of his seat. You gave our house to some strangers? Not strangers. Veterans. People who served their country. They deserve help. What about me? What about your family? Don't we deserve it? You're a grown man, Kaysen. You have a profession, an apartment, an income. Veterans often have nothing. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you did this. When did you do it? Last week. Got the paperwork from Dr. Rainford. Last week, there was desperation in Kaysen's voice. Was that before Vivian arrived? Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while. You're lying, Kaysen exploded. You did it out of spite. Because I put Vivian here. I silently opened the second envelope. Inside was a notice from McGregor and Associates, the law firm that represented the Veterans Foundation, a formal demand to vacate the premises within 72 hours. What's this? Kaysen asked, seeing the new document. An eviction notice, I answered, handing him the paper. Kaysen read it and slumped back in his chair. Eviction? Within 72 hours? Dad, do you realize what you've done? I understand perfectly. But where are we going to live? Vivian just got settled and now you'll have to find another place. I spoke in an even tone of voice. That was the plan all along. It's temporary accommodation. Temporary? Kaysen looked at me in disbelief. You set this whole thing up on purpose. I just made a decision about my property. It's my right. What about me? What about your son? I'm your only heir. You were, I corrected. Now there's nothing to inherit. At that moment, Vivian came into the kitchen. She was in her robe, her hair disheveled, her face without makeup. She looked worse than she ever had in the house. What's going on here? She asked, seeing Kaysen's face. Why are you yelling? Shinachim, my father, Kaysen said, looking at me with hatred, donated the house to a charity. We're being evicted. What? Vivian grabbed the papers and quickly ran her eyes over them. Is that true? Quite true, I confirmed. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Vivian sank slowly into a chair, still holding the documents. When did you do that? She asked quietly. Last week, before I arrived. Yes. So, she looked at me with understanding. So you knew from the start that we were going to be evicted? Yes. And you didn't say anything? Why would you say anything? You had nowhere to go anyway. Vivian stood up and walked over to me. Her eyes burned with rage, but her voice was steady. You're a sadist, bullying people who are in a difficult situation. No one forced you to come to my house, I replied calmly. It was Kaysen's decision. But you agreed. You said you were happy to help the family. I agreed because I knew it wouldn't last. It wouldn't be long. Kaysen jumped up and started pacing the kitchen. It can't be undone? Maybe it's not too late? It's too late, I said. The deeds are officially registered. I don't own the house anymore. Where are you going to live? Kaysen asked. The foundation has authorized me to stay for the rest of my life, as a caretaker. Caretaker? Vivian laughed hysterically. In your own house? Formerly my own. It's now a home for needy veterans. And we're not needy? Kaysen asked bitterly. You have an apartment and a job. Vivian has an education and an opportunity to earn money. A lot of veterans have nothing. Don't lecture me about morality, Kaysen exploded. You're just getting back at me for not asking your permission. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe you're just doing what you want with your property. Like you did with my life. Your life? What do you mean? You came into my house and announced that I was moving into the garage. Without discussion, without asking. You decided for me. It was temporary and for the family. For the family? I looked at Kaysen closely. Vivian is your ex-wife. You're getting a divorce. What kind of family is that? We're not officially divorced yet, but we're in the process. That means she's going to be a complete stranger soon, and you kicked your father out of his house for a stranger. Kaysen was silent, not knowing what to say. Vivian stared at the documents, thinking something over. May I ask, she said at last, what is this Veterans Fund? Who heads it? The director is retired Colonel James Thornton, Gulf War veteran, a man of honor and integrity. And the lawyers? Vivian pointed to the letterhead. McGregor and Associates? Big firm. They specialize in housing law. Vivian nodded. I see, so it's almost impossible to appeal the decision. Impossible, I confirmed. She went humming. And we really only have 72 hours? From the time the notice is served. That's until Friday, 6 on p.m. It's Tuesday, Vivian calculated. So it's Friday. She got up and headed out of the kitchen. Where are you going? Kaysen asked. To pack, and looking for a new place to live. She turned to me on the threshold. You know, Mr. Ashburn, you're not the helpless old man you pretended to be. And you're not as smart a woman as you thought you were, I replied. After she left, Kaysen and I were alone. My son sat at the table, staring at the papers as if he hoped the text would change if he stared at it long enough. Dad, he said finally, do you really hate me that much? I don't hate you, Kaysen. I'm disappointed in you. For what? Because you stopped seeing me as a person. To you, I'm just an old man to be ignored. That's not true. Yes, it is. You came into my house and announced that I was moving into the garage. You didn't ask, you didn't discuss, you decided for me. But this is a family matter. Family matters are discussed as a family. You're just putting me on the spot. Kaysen lowered his head. Maybe I was wrong, but is that any reason to disinherit me? An inheritance has to be earned, I said. Respect, care, love, not taken for granted. I got up from the table and headed for the door. Where are you going? Kaysen asked. To the garage, to pack. I need to get ready for the change too. But you're staying in the house. I am, but on different terms. As caretaker, not master. As I stepped out into the courtyard, I took a deep breath of the cool morning air. The plan was working perfectly. 3 more days and Kaysen and Vivian would leave my house for good. And I would stay here, in a house that technically no longer belonged to me, but where I would live for the rest of my days. Sometimes to keep what you love, you have to give it up. The next 3 days passed in tense silence. Kaysen and Vivian methodically packed, called realtors, looked for temporary housing. I watched their hustle from the sidelines, offering no help or sympathy. On Wednesday night, Kaysen tried to talk to me again. I was sitting in the garage reading a book by the light of a desk lamp. He knocked and walked in without waiting for an invitation. Dad, I need to say something, he began, standing awkwardly at the entrance. Yes, I answered, not lifting my eyes from the book. I found a rental apartment for Vivian. It's on the outskirts of town. It's expensive, but there's no other option. Okay, I said indifferently. Dad, look at me, Kaysen asked. I lifted my head and looked at my son. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his cheeks puffy, his hands shaking with nervous tension. Is there anything else we can do? He asked. Go, talk to this Veterans Foundation? Explain the situation? What situation? I interjected. That my son kicked me out of my own bedroom for my ex-wife? No, he didn't. He asked me to move out temporarily. Without my consent, just like that. But I thought you'd understand. Family. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. It's an interesting concept. When you needed help with school, I was family. When you needed money for a wedding, for an apartment, for a car, I was family. And when you decided to take over my house, suddenly I wasn't family anymore. I was just an obstacle. That's not true, Dad. Yes, it is, Kaysen. And now I've made my own decisions about my life, without your input. Kaysen was silent for a few minutes, staring at the concrete floor of the garage. What's going to happen to us? He finally asked. We'll still be father and son, won't we? Biologically, yes, I answered. But as a family, no. Family means mutual respect and caring, and we don't have that anymore. Dad, don't say that. Maybe in time. Nothing's going to change, Kaysen. You showed me who you really are, and I've taken that to heart. Kaysen stood for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the garage. That was our last conversation as father and son. Thursday morning, the truck arrived. Kaysen and 2 movers started moving Vivian's things out. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and watched them haul suitcases, boxes, and bags. Vivian fussed around, explaining things to the movers, checking lists of things. She never once looked in my direction, never said a word of goodbye. For her, I no longer existed, which was quite mutual. By lunchtime, most of the stuff had been taken out. The only things left were personal belongings and what would fit in Kaysen's car. At 2:30, Vivian came down for the last time. She was wearing an expensive coat, her hair neatly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was going to a business meeting, not leaving the house after an eviction. "Kaysen, I'm waiting in the car," she said, not even looking in my direction. "Just a minute," Kaysen replied. "Renaud, I want to take some pictures from my childhood. Hurry up, I've got until 6 o'clock to get the keys to the apartment." She walked out, slamming the door. The house was silent, broken only by Kaysen's footsteps in the living room. He was taking family photos off the walls, putting them in a box. I rose from the table and made my way into the living room. Kaysen was standing in front of the mantelpiece, holding a picture of our wedding with Martha. "Can I have it?" he asked without turning around. "Take it," I agreed. "It's your mother." He gently put the photo in the box, then took a few more pictures. His childhood, his high school graduation, moments of happy family life that were in the past. "Dad," he said, closing the box, "I want you to know. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way." "I know," I replied. "You just didn't think about the consequences. The usual. Maybe when things are settled we can—" "No," I interrupted. "We can't. It's over, Kaysen." He nodded, took the box, and headed for the exit. He stopped at the door and turned around. "Goodbye, Dad." "Goodbye," I replied. The difference was fundamental. They say goodbye forever and say goodbye when they hope to see each other again. But my hope died the moment Kaysen announced that I was moving into the garage. I escorted him with a glance to the car. Vivian was sitting in the front seat staring at her phone. Kaysen put the box in the trunk, got behind the wheel. The car started, drove out of the yard. I stood at the window and watched them drive away. No one waved goodbye. No one looked back. The sound of the engine grew quieter, then disappeared around the corner. The house was completely silent. I walked slowly around the rooms, examining what was left of their stay. In the master bedroom, there were no more jars of makeup on the dressing table. On the bed was my old bedspread instead of the silk set Vivian had brought. Martha's perfume bottles were back in the bathroom. I'd put them back where they'd been when Vivian had left. The house was mine again. Technically, it belonged to a charitable foundation, but I would be living in it, alone, just like before. But now it was conscious solitude, not forced. I went down to the basement and started rebuilding the electrical system. Patrick Stelling had done his job skillfully, but reversibly. In half an hour, I had the wiring back to normal. It took another half hour to repair the plumbing. Cody Paxton had also provided a quick fix. By evening, the electricity and plumbing in the house were working normally again. I took a hot shower, made dinner, and sat in my chair by the window with a cup of tea and a newspaper. The sun was setting outside the window, coloring the sky pink. Mrs. Croft's neighbor was watering the flowers in the front garden. The ordinary, quiet suburban life I'd almost lost. There were still pictures of Martha on the mantelpiece that Kaysen hadn't taken. She smiled from the portraits, young and beautiful as I remembered her. Next to it stood a clock, a silver wedding present. It ticked smoothly and quietly, counting down the hours of my new life. A life without the son who had betrayed me. Without a former daughter-in-law who wanted to turn my house into her own. Without people who only saw me as a source of convenience, not a person with feelings and rights. Now I was free of all that, free to be myself in my own home, among the things that held the memory of Martha and the best years of my life. The phone didn't ring. No one was interested in how I'd survived the eviction of the tenants, if I needed help, if I was lonely. Kaysen didn't even call to see if they'd made it to the new apartment. I ceased to exist for him, just as he ceased to exist for me. It was only fair. Everyone got what they deserved. I finished my tea, folded the paper, and went upstairs. The bedroom smelled of Martha's perfume. I'd opened one bottle on purpose to bring back the scent of the room. I went to my bed, in my bedroom, in my house. There were no more voices behind the wall planning my future. There were no demands for silence, no noise, no fish and garlic cooking. I could live the way I wanted to live, not the way that was convenient for the temporary tenants. As I fell asleep, I thought about the fact that life sometimes gives you a second chance. A chance to correct mistakes, to restore justice, to regain what is rightfully yours. I took that chance, and I didn't regret it for a minute. The house was mine again, and I was home again.